The nucleus of my talk will be the temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el Bahari, the place which in her times was the nucleus of the Theban necropolis in many aspects. In fact, in terms of the sacred landscape, rituals and festivals, thinking of the Feast of the Valley, and also in terms of artistic activities. So as a word of introduction, I would like referring to Susan Bickel's article entitled "Man in the Temple" explain how I came to this interest in human aspect of the work, namely in artistic activity at the temple. Then I will comment briefly on the methodology that I apply to it, explaining what I understand under these abbreviations. As the main body of my talk, I will concentrate on several individuals whom I suspect to be involved in the design process. So referring to this man and the temple topic, I would like to start with something personal, that working at the temple, which is mainly about the epigraphy, at least in my case it is so, epigraphy, which is in turn very close inspection of the wall decoration, one cannot avoid spotting various signs or manifestations of human work, the presence of a human hand, we would say, something which for sure is experienced by everyone who deals with mural decoration. And so, upon closer look, we see different stages of artistic work, like an application of a grid with which the decorating process started, or sometimes unfinished relief with preparatory drawings preserved. This example comes from one of the niches in the solar complex, or various unfinished, sometimes imperfectly carved places, or else those places where an apprentice worked side by side with the master sculptor. Both here in this photo, you can see that both were sculpting wigs. Let alone even the changes in the architectural layout that sometimes impose the change in the decoration. Here I am encircling in this plan only those places about which I know that they are different than the initial plan, and probably those instances are more numerous. From this perspective, especially in terms of these various changes, reworkings, erasures, additions, one may think of a sketch taking its monumental three-dimensional shape directly at the spot. And here I am comparing this idea or illustrating it with the Leonardo da Vinci studies for nativity. So thinking of all those erasures, additions, we are thinking about this sketch taking this monumental shape, although we may securely assume that erecting such building as our temple required a lot of preparatory actions such as planning, architectural calculations, drawings, consulting older documents, sometimes consulting older monuments. Sometimes these monuments were those older documents. Consultations with the patron. We may imagine that such consultations were taking place, and all these actions were to be done beforehand. And this process, the conception stage, where the mind has its leading role, is what interests me the most. After all, we may, or even we should, imagine that at some point the temple, yet physically non-existent, existed as a plan, just like these plans of two Ramesside tombs in the King's Valley, while the decoration of the temple existed in the shape of a model drawing or model drawings. At Deir el Bahari, we are not that lucky to have any of these, so we are left to deal with the final product of the design operation. But even an analysis of the final product may tell us something about the creation stage. The question is, can it tell us about the author? Here a brief comment on the anonymity of art in ancient Egypt, and I am referring here to the paper and very nice summary on the issue of artists in ancient Egypt by Dimitri Labouri and Alice de Villiers. Shall we indeed perceive ancient Egyptian artists as a non-existing category? Of course not. It is true that the authors are rarely connected to their works compared to the amount of works that we have from ancient Egypt. However, it's not quite so that the whole art is anonymous, and examples are quite numerous of private tombs to have their artists identified. Here, for instance, you have an example from the tomb of a local governor at Ahmim, dating to the 6th dynasty, where two brother artists were active. Sani, with the title of Scribe of Forms, which we would translate as draughtsman, and his brother Isesi with the title Scribe of the Gods' Books of the Palace. Their images are inserted in a scene representing the tomb owner fishing in the marshland by the principle that in the modern art history terms self-portrait in assistenza. This is when the author inserts their image, their self-portrait, in their own multi-figured composition. I mean, the composition designed by themselves. Here, both artists, and this is significant, they are represented in the attire of a lector priest, and they're holding short papyrus scrolls in their hands. And in this inscription, Seni says, "It was I who inscribed the tomb of the Count Hani, and it was I who inscribed the tomb being alone." This is a very significant example, which indicates first that the artist could have the same, he could have been at the same time a priest, so have a priestly function. And second, that there was not a big difference between writing and drawing, as all these activities are being described by the verb sash, to write. We have even two viziers from the same period of the 6th dynasty. So two viziers represented in their tombs while painting on an easel, Mereruka and Hentika Ihehi. Again, noteworthy are their sashes across their chests, pointing to their position as a lector priest, or indicating this function, at least in this scene. And also scribal palettes. So scribal palettes are hanging from their shoulders, and their children who are involved in these scenes are coming to their fathers also with scribal equipment. So we may think, if we are looking at the workshop scene here, in which children are taught how to paint, the titles of these children are significant. They are either lector priests or scribes of the House of Divine Books of the palace. Moving towards our period of time, so closer to the times of Hatshepsut, here is Ahmose, son of Ibana from the early 18th dynasty, in his tomb at El Kab, shown along with his grandson Bahiri. And this Bahiri claims to be in charge of the works in the tomb of his grandfather, in his own words, causing his name to live. Is also holding a palette as a sign of his occupation, while his title is the scribe of forms, so draughtsman. And final example from the time closer to Thutmose period, from the tomb of Amenhotep Sise, TT 75 at the Theban necropolis, post Hatshepsut, the time of Thutmose IV, where the author Usarhat inserts his image twice, once among the banqueting guests, and another time opposite this first example in a group of offering bearers, and in both cases with a palette, which is the attribute of his profession. So these signatures are met in private tombs, which are relatively small spaces. With large-scale projects such as temples, it was impossible to work being alone, as Seni claims, and hence the anonymity that results from workshop settings and from the diversification of tasks. I'm illustrating this thesis with an example of the Church of Santa Maria Novella in Florence that also is an effect of a collective work. You may see here how many people participated in the creating of its interior. In the Renaissance, by the way, the anonymity of artists was also a common phenomenon, and as art historians underline, it's only the social knowledge that linked the artist to his work. As in this adoration of the Magi painting, commissioned by a banker for his chapel in this very church, Santa Maria Novella in Florence. So the contemporary beholder knew who is who in this painting, and that the author, Botticelli, inserted his self-portrait here in the white square. On the other hand, artists like to leave subtle indications of their involvement. For instance, here Benozzo Gozzoli inserts his self-portrait in a hat, and the inscription on this hat says Opus Benotti, Opus Benot, so which is the play on words Opus Bene Notti, so note well this work. This is also a feature that is observed in ancient Egyptian art, as we will see in a moment, but it's not necessarily typical for those periods where art was commonly anonymous. My favorite modern example, here you have a Ukrainian artist, an illustrator, Vladislav Yerko, who among his illustrations to Andersen's Tales in their box inserts his signature made of cream, saying Yerko has created this cake, despite the fact that his name as an illustrator is featured on the book cover. This says something about the artist's playful mood connected with his ability to create things out of nothing. Very nicely comparable to what Benozzo Gozzoli does with his self-portrait in a red hat, saying, "The head is my work, the portrait wearing this head is my work, and the entire composition is my work." So, thinking of Hatshepsut and her three-layered cake at Deir Bahari, who was the author of this cake? Here we are lucky to have quite an abundance of data concerning how people who were involved in one way or another in the building project. On the one hand, these are the so-called namestones found in the under foundations of her valley temple. So these are kind of votive objects that bear Hatshepsut's nomen Maat Kara and a hieratic inscription naming an individual for whom this stone was prepared by yet somebody of a lower rank. And here I enlist those people whose name occur on these namestones. As you can see, starting with Senenmut or Vizier or the first prophet of Ammon, second prophet of Ammon, these are the highest officials of Hatshepsut times. But even if scholars seem to agree that these stones indicate some kind of involvement, they're silent as to what kind exactly were these people, for instance, supplying the workforce, the stone, or else they were participating in the design process. There is no clue to it. Another object category are building ostraka, and these are various administrative notes mentioning these people whom I enlist here. Again, these are quite high officials or the highest officials of the court. These texts are also quite enigmatic, saying that these people were present at the site, they were inspecting something, they were bringing offerings, supplying men, etc. And today I would like to concentrate on three men, Senenmut, Puemra, and Jehuti. As for them, we possess the greatest amount of data. First of all, their tombs are well preserved. As I will show you in a moment, they stay in dialogue with the temple and with one another. Because indeed, when we will observe a similarity between the tomb decoration and the temple decoration, it seems to me accurate to look at it not as an inspiration by the temple, which is a top-down influence, but as a mutual creative interrelationship, which is possible, at least how I see it, when someone was at the same time designing or at least overseeing the design of the temple and of their own funerary monuments. And this interrelationship is a mental operation, combining inspiration, but also a deliberate choice of referring to some particular motifs, designs, or architectural solutions, which is intended to communicate a message to the third party, and this third party is an observer about this interlink. A good term to apply to this phenomenon is intertextuality. The term introduced in the 60s by Yulia Krishcheva, saying that any text, she applied it to the modern literature. So she says that any text is a mosaic of quotations. And intericonicity, another term which has been brought by Dimitri Labourie to the field of Egyptology, who proposes to apply the same thoughts to iconography. While we know that in Egyptian art the text and the image complement each other, or they're used interchangeably, speaking of the dialogue between, let's say, two scenes, we would apply to it intericonicity or intertextuality, or both. In case of architecture, the third factor not to be neglected is the space, and this is something that I propose to term interspatiality. And so, when one moment, be it a tomb or a temple, is the result of combination of these three factors or components, text, image, and space, the dialogue between the monuments shall be considered, in terms of intertextuality, intericonicity, and interspatiality. Now, finally, turning from these somewhat abstract considerations to real people, we'll start with Senenmut, whom Egyptological tradition considers the main architect of the Deir el Bahari temple, and somehow by the extension, its main designer. Indeed, he shall be considered as great overseer or great administrator of the construction site. Given, for instance, his prominent presence in the so-called Cave of Scribes, also known as a Dirty Cave, an unfinished Middle Kingdom tomb overhanging the temple. Chloe Ragazzoli, who has published this cave along with its inscriptions, believes that this image representing Senenmut, as well as the offering formula dedicated to him by one scribe, they're placed in such a prominent location within this scribe, which allows her to believe that these were the first inscriptions there that initiated, in a way, the popularity of this place among the scribes. And saying scribes, we mean members of the intellectual elite. Common knowledge. Senenmut is exceptionally represented behind many doors of the temple, which by some scholars has been interpreted as the sign of his involvement. But I would rather see it as the expression of the king's, queen's, Hatshepsut's favor, and not a sign of his personal involvement in the design. This is rather a contextual evidence of his exceptional position. This statue of him holding Hathoric emblem, which is now in Cairo, is in fact the only source of his own claim to participate in Hatshepsut's building projects. And I should mention that we have as many as 25 his statues, plus one lately identified as belonging to Senenmut by Campbell Price. So in this statue, he says that he was the director, supervisor of all the king's works in Karnak Temple, in Luxor Temple, in Mut, Presing in Karnak, and also in Deir el Bahari. While this information is rather general about being the main manager of the project, later on in the same text, however, he says that he was the one who leads all Hamut, and this latter word, Hamut, is very close to our concept of art. This upper tomb, TT71, sadly has almost none decoration preserved, so we do not have Senenmut's autobiography, which was probably included there. In terms of the dialogue between the temple and his two tombs, there is only one match that I can point, namely in his lower tomb in chamber A, which is the only chamber decorated in this tomb. Book of the Dead, chapter 148, surrounds his false door, and the same chapter was surrounding the false door in his upper tomb. The false door itself is now in Berlin. And the same chapter surrounds the false door in the cult chapel of Hatshepsut in her temple. Now the cryptographic frieze. This frieze, which is a rebus of Hatshepsut's prenomen Matkara, found on many walls of Deir el Bahari temple, is often considered as Senenmut's signature. This view is based on that fact that three Senenmut statues use exactly this cryptogram, and that they expose his special devotion to Senenmut, the harvest goddess, playing on the associations of one of his titles, namely the overseer of the double granary of Ammon, because we may read this cryptogram not only as a mat, ka, ra, but also as Renenutet is the ka of Ra, and in this case, ka would mean provisions, food, and sustenance. Just the question remains, was this cryptogram Senenmut's personal invention? For instance, Peter Dorman, who is the best Senenmut specialist, is skeptical, saying that there is little evidence to support this, and I cannot disagree with him. Indeed, another statue of Senenmut has a direct claim that he has invented these two cryptograms, saying that they were not found in the writings of the ancestors. This is ancient Egyptian way to say that I have invented them. Just these two cryptograms are not the same as this Matkara cryptogram, and it was this cryptogram that was widely used, and not only by Senenmut. Here, for instance, we have a statue of Jehuti Nefer. An individual attested also on the building Ostraka from Deir el Bahari. He was an overseer of the treasury. So he's using this cryptogram as well. The same or similar cryptogram is found in the tomb of Puyem Ra, here alternating with sphinxes wearing Atef crown. Speaking of cryptography, in Hatshepsut times, the most serious cryptographer was Jehuti, who was also overseer of the treasury. In his tomb, TT11, Drabu al-Naga, we find two cryptographic texts, and this Jehuti is my main suspect as a person in charge of the design of the temple. What do we know about him? Apart from the name stones, he's known from this letter found at Deir Bahari. The letter is addressed to Lord Jehuti without further titles, but this Lord Jehuti is believed to be the same person as the overseer of the treasury, Jehuti. So this Jehuti is addressed by someone named Tet, asking Jehuti to resolve a misunderstanding with the people subordinate to the main priest of Heliopolis. Which is informative in that way that it shows that one priestly personnel from Heliopolis was present during the construction of the temple, and that Jehuti was involved in something happening at that point there. Jehuti himself is very specific about his involvement in the construction projects of Hatshepsut in his autobiography, which is luckily preserved to us. This is the so-called Northampton stela inserted into the facade of his tomb. So, this text is very exceptionally conceptually, we would say, composed. After an introduction, which is here, we have 15 lines that introduce Jehuti's titles or epithets to characterize his person. Then there is a vertical column which serves as a refrain, and then each line continues with the description of a project he participated in. So in line 5 we read the hereditary prince who instructs Hamu to work Jehuti. He says, the refrain, he says, I acted as a chief spokesman who gives instructions. I led Hamu to work according to the tasks in Jeseru, the temple of millions of years. And this word highlighted in gray, Hamu, means artists. So the wording he uses here is significant, being about being the chief spokesman and giving instructions. And it is significant also because in the autobiography of Ineni, the mayor of Thebes, who was responsible for the construction projects under Hatshepsut's father, Thutmose I, in Karnak, and also he was responsible for the preparation of the king's tomb, unseen and unheard. He also says, instructions were not given to me by the elder, and he also claims that he was a chief spokesman of every work. So these two autobiographies are comparable by their phraseology. And what is interesting, Jehuti, in the long litany enumerating good sides of his character and his mental abilities, finishes by stating that he is a skillful scribe who acts with his hands. And in a similar manner, the autobiography of Inani is finished by saying that he is a scribe, while and this is something that Hanna Navratilova and Niv Alon underline in their book on scribes. Among many, many monuments left by Senenmut and in long list of his titles, the title such is not attested even once. The question occurs why, and I am leaving it unanswered. We may return to it later on. In terms of giving instructions to artists, another artifact is of crucial importance to characterize our Jehuti, the so-called apprentice board found in front of his tomb, which is believed to belong to his funerary equipment. This is the board containing 3 types of exercises, once executed by the more assured hand and then repeated by someone who was rather a student. So 3 exercises in writing, in drawing a statue, and in composing a 2-dimensional image. The different types of Helmut artistry, we would say. Now let's move to the chapel of Hatshepsut. Its lateral walls were very typical for this room offering scenes, showing Hatshepsut at the offering table and in front of her procession of men bringing various goods. These men have titles, but no names. And while different titles occur repeatably on 2 walls, and I should say that we have exactly 200 men represented on both walls. So different titles occur here and there, but only one title seems to stand out, occurring only once, and this is Jehuti's main title, the overseer of the treasury, occurring here on the north wall at the head of what is to be seen as the offering procession proper. Closing this procession, there was a god Jehuti represented, so one may think of a homonymity of names underlined here. And interestingly, the speech of Jehuti seems to be inspired by the text typical for the Hermopolitan area, popular in the Middle Kingdom, namely offering formula that mention Thoth and the dual shrine of the south and north, who act according to the writing that Thoth has made in the house of divine books. And we remember that in case of 2 brother artists, or in case of viziers painting on the easel, that these titles occur in that context of artistic activity. Yeah, so the scribe of the house of divine books is the title that we may securely connect with the artist. So this area, Hermopolis, which is of course the cult center of god Jehuti, who was the patron of scribes and lector priests, seemed to be the place of our treasurer Jehuti's origin, which is to be judged by the titles that have been collected by Jose Galan, such as governor in Herwer near Hermopolis, or overseer of priests of Hathor, lady of Kuza, also from the same area, and the overseer of priesthood in Hermopolis itself. So collecting all this together, these 2 figures seem to point to the overseer or the treasury Jehuti, and I should mention that the god Jehuti is shown here as a divine lector priest, just as our 2 brother artists are shown wearing a sash of lector priest across their chest and holding short papyrus scroll. If this interpretation is accurate, to see Jehuti encrypted, so to speak, in these 2 figures, we are dealing here with a self-portrait in assistenza and something which art history terms self-portrait in figura, by the principle as in the early Renaissance art. Taddeo di Bartolo seems to represent himself as Saint Judas Thaddeus, or else when artists represent themselves in the role of Saint Lucas, one of the 4 evangelists, popularly believed to have been a painter, the author of the first portrait of Madonna, and according to some sources, he was also a physician and thus a scientist. Back to Jehuti, Jehuti the man and Jehuti the god. In Hatshepsut's temple, there is another such case where both are involved. This time, this is the scene at the Punt portico, the scene of measuring the antiu, which came from the land of Punt. Here, behind four men represented with bushels, the fifth man was standing, and his figure was erased in Hatshepsut times. He's identified by the rest of the inscription in front of his face as the scribe and the overseer of the treasury, Jehuti. And behind him stands the god Jehuti, who is writing the amount of this antiu. So while in the chapel of Hatshepsut, both the man and the god are involved in more ritual activities, here they are both involved in counting, which is another feature typical for the god Jehuti, who is as a moon god was responsible also for more precise matters such as all the measurement and counting. Back in the chapel of Hatshepsut, thought on the north wall is complemented on the opposite wall by the image of a deity Yun Mutef. And this god is playing the role of the deceased heir, and together with Jehuti, they act as a pair of divine ritualists, a Sam priest and a lector priest. And while the presence of these two priests is a common thing in the offering scenes since the Old Kingdom, the presence of Yunmutef and Thoth in such scenes seems to be a novelty of Hatshepsut times. As it seems, introduced first in this very temple. In all the niches of the third terrace, we have either them both together as a pair, or else in the solar complex, for instance, Yunmutef is represented on both lateral walls as well as in the main sanctuary. However, in the main sanctuary, the entrance is flanked by two quite big figures of Jehuti, who is pronouncing a long offering text. So if it's accurate to see the treasurer Jehuti cryptographically represented here as Thoth, thinking of who may be represented in the attire of Yunmutef, I'm thinking about Puyem-Ra, the second prophet of Amun. We have met him among the people mentioned on the namestones. Additionally, he has his name and title left on the blocks from the lower temple of Hatshepsut. But first of all, he's my main candidate because in his tomb, TT 39, located in the Asasif in front of the temple, there is a great similarity observed with the decorative layout of Hatshepsut temple. For instance, same texts are incorporated in the offering list of Hatshepsut and in Puyem-Ra's tomb as well. In another offering scene in his tomb in the middle chapel, he is addressed by a lector priest whose name is Yahmes, with the words that are very close to those words that Thoth says in the chapel of Hatshepsut. And in fact, based on this text, which is better preserved, I was able to reconstruct from traces the text said by Thoth in the chapel. On the facade of Puimra's tomb, which is notably similar to that of Jehuti, as has been noted by Diego Espinel. So on this facade, we find two stelae with autobiographical texts, very fragmentarily preserved, but still on the one hand there we find his title as a Sem priest. And on the other hand, he's claiming, just as our Jehuti, giving instructions to Hamu, using the same phraseology. What is more, in front of his tomb, fragments of a similar board have been found that remind of that Drabu el Naga board, which is assumed to belong to Jehuti himself. Puimra shows in his tomb how exactly he's giving instructions to the artists. Here is a scene of the overseers of artists and overseers of work, both in Amun's precinct, shown coming to him to report their achievements, like erection of two obelisks, and the products of the artistic workshop are displayed behind them. Notably, here is the chest with this cryptographic Maatkara frieze that I have shown you earlier. And this scene, in turn, reminds of a scene in Hatshepsut's Spoon portico where she is shown enthroned, holding a staff and a scepter, informing about her decision to organize the expedition in this long text. And in front of her, three persons with the same gesture as in this Puimra scene are standing and listening. This is Nehesi, the expedition leader, Senenmut, and the third anonymous man. The scene in Pun Portico, which shows two Jehutis, the man and the god, has its counterpart in Puimra's tomb too. Here, behind two men with bushels, stands a man with a posture similar to that of the erased Jehuti in the Pun Portico, and the label of this man is the king's recorder, so Samanu Nasut, while the same verb to record, Saman, is used to describe what Thoth is doing in the Pun Portico, recording in writing, etc. Isn't it an interplay between these two scenes? Iconographic references to Pun are attested in Jehuti's tomb as well. The scene is seriously damaged, but what we may observe is a heap of antiu and somebody standing behind one hip. This personage here has been compared by Jose Galan with the chief of Punt represented on this wall in the Punt portico. But an additional meaning of or interplay of meanings between this scene in Jehuti's tomb and the Punt portico is this: what in the temple is overseen by the god Jehuti was in reality overseen by the treasurer Jehuti, because Antiu was the product that was finally coming to the treasury. So far, I have presented an intertextual or inter-iconic dialogue between both Puim Ra's tomb and Jehuti's tomb and the temple. This makes me think of Jehuti and Puim Ra working together. Puim Ra seems to be younger than Jehuti. Jehuti disappears before the end of Hatshepsut's reign, while Jehuti successively continues under Thutmose III. Jehuti and the first prophet of Amun Habu-Seneb seem to be of the same generation. And we know that Puim Ra was married to Habu-Seneb's daughter. So if we consider this possible that Puim Ra was younger than Jehuti, can we think of a master-apprentice relationship between them? This relationship is visible in a dialogue between their tombs too. Here is a panel that I was showing earlier, that one which contains two cryptographic texts. And this composition reoccurs, creatively transformed, in Puim Ra's tomb in his middle chapel, in two versions on two side walls. I will not go into details here, just highlighting corresponding scenes with the same colors. And what is interesting is this scene in blue. While the Sam priest in Puim Ra's tomb pronounces the words in front of the tomb owner, may you exist in the temple of millions, with your bow, with you as at the beginning, which we would characterize as a Sahu text. In Jehuti's tomb, in this corresponding scene, the space in front of the Sam priest is blank, even though the entire scene is perfectly finished, which looks like a deliberate operation, but I cannot explain the meaning of it. May we assume that it was known among their contemporaries? What does it mean? Maybe. So, can we think of Puim Ra, for instance, encrypted as a Sam priest in the tomb of Jehuti? Note that in Puim Ra's version of this scene, which is here, he himself is shown acting as a Sam priest and making offerings to the gods, namely to Hathor and Osiris. Or the other way round, in Puim Ra's offering scene, that one which is very close to the scene in the chapel of Hatshepsut, the scene is topped with the Hatshepsut formula, and this formula is absent in our chapel. So this Hatshepsut formula starts with the phrase that the offering is given by king and whom Jehuti, the head of Rehit, and this head of Rehit is the epithet used in the Pun portico, but normally we would expect here in this formula either Osiris or Anubis. So how should we explain this sudden devotion to Jehuti? Isn't it the same idea as, I assume, is present in the temple of Hatshepsut, with the treasurer Jehuti playing the role of the god Thoth and Puim Ra playing the role of Yunmutef, a Sam priest? To summarize, was the work at Deir el Bahari, when its creation stages concern a one-man's work? I would rather say that it was a teamwork, and probably there were more people than just Senenmut, the great overseer of the whole project, and Jehuti and Vuimra involved. We may assume that also there was Hapuseneb and Duauernehech or Penyati and others involved as well. So this is my final slide, which I would characterize as a true internet of Hatshepsut times, which I understand as interdependence and interrelation or interconnection of monuments, sources, models, and ideas, something we would call the social or artistic network. And while I'm illustrating this idea with modern icons representing the modern internet, the tool is different, or the tools are different, but the main idea is the same. This is about communication, or indeed a dialogue. And with this, I'm saying thank you very much for your attention.